Knock, knock.
Good to see you're hydrated. That's good.
It's one of those, I've been drinking a lot more water, and
Yeah,
you could probably attest. I mean, it's not like I just discovered a health hack here, but
it is though. I
it
mean,
makes a huge difference.
it does, and I mean, I have to tell myself that all the time. My wife, I mean, you would think beyond me as an oncology nurse, she would totally get it. But I mean, there are days you get home, or even just on the weekend, where it's like, I need to drink a lot of water today.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
whoa,
it's
and
it's it's the reason for so many things,
yeah,
headaches, achiness. Like I got my booster yesterday,
yeah.
and I'm like wrecked today. I don't know like what's going on. I was fine when I got the full,
Yeah,
vaccination, but this booster is like, I don't know.
hit you a little
It's
differently.
doing a
I mean,
number on
that's
me.
the things they don't tell you. Like I mean,
Yeah.
you can ask as many people as you want. Like, how did you feel? What did you react? And I mean, I was the same way. I haven't got my booster yet, and like I said, wife works in healthcare, so she has to immediately, way sooner. Um, I had never gotten a flu shot. I mean, we both were teachers. It was never anything that ever came across or anything like. So I had no idea how I was going to be reacting. But I'm like, I'm fairly healthy. This should be okay. And my parents, well, everybody moved here because we just had a kiddo. He's 13 months now, but they live like an hour from us. So we trade off between the weekends coming back and forth. And I got the shot in the morning. I was fine. On the way home, and it was like the same weekend that my mom had knee surgery. And we were there like the night, the week, or the day before. And so I'm on my way home and I'm like, Tracy, I was like, my head hurts. I was like, I think I must not have eaten enough. I was like, I'm getting tired. By the time I got home, I'm like, I think I'm dead.
Yeah. Oh my
And
God.
no idea. Like, I mean, and it was gone. But I
From the
mean,
flu shot?
no, no, no. I'm
Oh,
sorry, from my COVID
COVID.
vaccine. And I
Yeah.
mean, but I've never had any experience with any kind of vaccination shot. I mean, other than as
Yeah.
babies, but
Right.
no clue how you're gonna. So yeah, but water helps. I can't say I'm the best either. When I'm bored, then I'll drink like a fish.
Yeah. I think it's important to just like have it on your desk and make it as easy to take as possible. Like
Yeah.
this is actually hard to unscrew and make sure I don't spill it. But just one of those like squirt bottles,
It's
get
easier.
that.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I always, and it's funny. I mean, you think that would be the easy. I can't tell you how many times I have that conversation, and then it's like, oh, you're right. I'm like, kind
Yeah.
of, but it is. I mean, the best thing that I've found from myself, like you said. I keep my just a Yeti cup there, but that's a lot in one shot. Um, but at least like tracking it, and that whether you have like a gallon jug and that's your gauge, or some other fancy cup,
Yeah.
it at least makes you look and go, oh, it's 1 o'clock. Shoot, no wonder why I've got a headache. I've only drank a quarter of
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But it's tough for anybody. So
So
thank you
that's
for
the
doing this.
podcast, right? So
Yeah,
that's
that was it.
that's the show, everybody. Hope you
Glad to have you. No, thank you for doing this. I'm completely humbled. You have no
I
idea.
mean, you're such a fan. I'm like honored to make this happen and happy to finally make our acquaintance,
Yeah.
like officially like speak to one another.
I'm a fan. I mean, to be honest, I'm a fan for starters because of my wife. In fact, this morning she left, and I was curious how she was going to leave this morning because she leaves a little bit earlier. Our son is just about to wake up shortly after she leaves, and it's usually the same like
She's like,
exit. And I was like,
she
"What
like
is she going to say?"
sneaking out of the
And
house.
she just left and didn't say anything. She wasn't like, "Good luck" or anything. And I'm like, I kind of expected because when we moved here, we've always had some kind of discussion when it comes to finances, and our backgrounds are different as far as our family conversations. But when we moved from Charlotte to here, our expectations was family and house, and so they kind of ramped up everything. And she's like, well, here's the podcast that I love listening to.
Oh wow.
And so it was that
So
introduction.
great.
And then I don't know what I did, whether I commented, and I came home from a run. I was like, so Farnoosh just followed me. And she's like, what? How is that possible? I'm the one who introduced you. How many times I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I did. So it's probably been in her head for the past couple of years. So when I said that this is happening, she's like,
If you're
incredible.
I don't know if you record this, but we'll do a special shout out. I mean, you're recording it obviously.
I'm
but
already
like a
recording.
video.
Yeah. I have a
Yeah.
bad habit of this is my one learned mistake. I'm sure you're the same way. Just things that
I have done that so
so many, right?
more times than I'd like to admit, and
Yeah,
always with a guess that like you're nervous
it's
about.
big, right? So that's you for me at this point, and I was like,
Oh,
it's
well,
surely
I mean,
something's gonna mess up, but we'll
the
see.
other day I forgot to turn my mic on,
Don't
and
know.
so you could hear me, but it wasn't being recorded.
Yeah,
And so I go to
yeah.
like get my track. I'm like, this is empty. And
Mm,
so luckily it was just my part. So I just had
you
to
could do
re-record
that. Yeah,
my stuff.
I've certainly been there. And I have
Oh
a brother
man.
who's in IT, and he loves to remind anybody, but especially myself, that Wi-Fi is a luxury and not a guarantee.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so fine. I don't want to be fancy. We'll just whatever works. And so this is how this works.
Yeah.
So yeah. So thank you
You're welcome.
and welcome to everything. So my biggest question, and I had it like years ago, because as soon as and this is not like how can I make her feel great? This is like an absolute like true. As soon as I started hearing the conversation, it resonated, 'cause I like things simple, and I think that's probably what hit me with you, is that these were big conversations. And I have a father who mom and dad met on Wall Street. Dad was in brokerage services. He's worked from everybody from NCNB, as I think when he moved from South Carolina here, originally from up there, First Union, Wachovia. So it was like a conversation that's in our head. But he was in brokerage services all his life, so that conversation was like, yes, you need to save money. You need your 401ks, but like the rest of his conversation, it was like it was like you work for the police department. You don't bring that home. Um, and so it slowly is like
Interesting.
making sense.
Okay.
But the way it's always been presented to me is that it feels simple when it comes, from you and the things you had to say. But
Oh, thanks.
my favorite explanation truly has been from Psych Yourself Rich, and you use the word holistic, and obviously that rings a bell for me. But I'm curious as to how that came across for you. Would that just kind of that's how it feels to you, or did it kind of just evolve into talking
Mm,
about finances, money holistically?
yeah. I will say that that was a realization that was during this interesting time in my career. I got an opportunity to actually go on television and help real people with their money. So prior to this, a lot of my work was like writing about money, maybe going on a TV segment and giving you 5 tips, but never really engaging with
Yeah,
the end user, with the person who's actually going to
who's actually
receive
going
the
through it? Yeah,
advice and then kind of like work it out with that person individually. But then I did a show in, I think it was 2009 or 2010, One Hit Wonder as my TV career. That's like that's the title of my TV career book. It's like the one hit wonders. I did a show called Bank of Mom and Dad. And the premise
yeah,
was to go into these households where usually a young woman has, been mismanaging her money. And I'm going to come and save the day. It's sort of like the nanny, but with money. Like you come
but with
in, you
money.
assess, right? And you like make a chore chart or whatever you do. You make a budget and you leave, and then you check in 3 months later. And what I was not prepared for, but what ultimately became the job was less about like, here's my fancy budget that I made you. And it was instead a lot of just like being a shoulder to cry on,
Yeah,
and being a friend and listening and getting really beneath the layers, peeling back the onion. So you walk in thinking this woman is saddled in with credit card debt. Maybe she didn't read the fine print. And then you realize, no, it's because she grew up in a particular kind of household, or
yeah,
she was given certain messages. She has low self esteem. She might have some mental health issues, all of this, right? And I realized, like, when we talk about money, we are not talking about money. That,
we're
yeah,
not
we're
right.
talking about dollars and cents to a degree, but that it is majority who we are, how we were raised, the
Yeah,
prism through which we see the world. And this was all of this was happening to me. I was realizing a lot of this at the same time when there was a huge body of scientific work coming into the world around behavioral finance
yeah,
and the psychology of money. And so I was reading a lot of that stuff and realizing, what can be my contribution to this space? There's a lot of like Nobel Prize winning economist papers on this. Maybe I
Right.
could write a book that really brings it down to street level
Yeah.
and says, "Hey, if you're emotional with your money, you're not alone. It's everybody's life, and here's how we can get our head straight around this and really think about money not as just sort of this area of our life, this siloed department of our life, but really the backbone, right,
Backbone.
to how we make healthy decisions, create healthy relationships, pursue what fulfills us."
And I mean, and I think it's obviously like, what struck a chord with me is the whole, there's a mental side to everything. And I think, I mean, with that one especially, it just became, and maybe you can touch upon that, what it feels so stigmatic, and it just, I mean, just the word alone, just saying the word money for a lot of people, it becomes such an anxious term. And, that's something that we discuss as, family constantly, my wife and I, is just that dynamic of where that, but where, and our, like I said, our backgrounds are different. I mean, it was, a comfortable conversation to a degree at home. Maybe if there was trouble, it wasn't as readily like shared. But then on the flip side, my wife, not so much and not so comfortable. And, but yet here we both are having a similar conversation about, what's the best approach and, how to go forward and what's not so fun altogether. But where did that stigma you think came from, or why do people feel like this automatic anxiety no matter how much you make? I feel.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a visceral reaction.
Yeah.
It's many things, JD. I think it's culturally we are not raised in environments where money is fluent. We don't talk about money. It's sort of like you either have it or you don't. It's very divisive.
Yeah.
And it can feel like, we talk about also money in these terms, the haves, the have-nots, the rich, the poor. It's very bipolar.
Yeah.
And then you don't maybe identify with that. I'm not rich, I'm not poor. Where do I fall? What does money mean? And for women especially, I think it's hard to talk about money and to feel like they have permission to engage with money, is because like money has been run by men for
Yeah.
the longest of time, just like a lot of other domains. And so we are new to this uh to this world,
Yeah.
and still it is very much, puppeteered by men. And so I think everyone's got their own money story, but I
Sure.
think if you grew up in America, culturally, you probably weren't raised to feel like it was okay to just start talking about money. Remember, like, if you asked your parents growing up, like, "How much do you make?" Oh my gosh.
Not a clue.
Um,
I can honestly tell you, like we until my dad. So my dad was like asked to leave Wachovia. I have no problem saying that,
Mhm.
because he was older and
Yeah.
his skill set was so beyond what people could do, and he was so valuable. It was like, we're gonna have to pay him for this, but we could pay a bunch of other people to do parts of that and get away with it. And it wasn't until that moment, that was probably the first moment I realized that we had a like an opportunity to struggle. Although my brother and I, and that's all we are, never felt it. That's the first time. That was probably close to like end of high school, or excuse me, end of middle school, beginning of high school, before that was even a dialogue, like how much I make. And I don't feel like that's the same now. I mean, it's almost like I'm JD. I make this much, and there you go. Nice to meet you.
Right.
And that's such an interesting change, and for what reason I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think for a lot of us, we grew up with this idea that money is a tool to measure our self worth
Yeah,
against. And, it doesn't help when you look at magazines and you watch TV and you read books, and it's like this characterization of certain people with levels of income. So, we can almost imagine if we had to paint in our minds, what would be somebody who is a rich man, like what's he doing, what's he wearing, what's his job. Rich woman, what's she wearing, what's she doing, what's her job, what's her personality. We have these
all these
biases,
images. Yeah,
right? And it's because like a lot of that has been fed to us by um the media, I think, and a lot of it is real life. But I think, we're both parents. Like when my kids watch, like I always give the example of the recent Muppets movie, and it's like the rich white oil tycoon who's going to try
yeah.
to steal all the Muppets' joy, and it's just that character,
Yeah,
that cliche. And but that's,
it's true though. I
we have
mean,
to think about what are our kids looking at, and what are
yeah,
they starting to piece together as far as who gets to be rich,
yeah,
and what that person is probably going to be like as far as personality. And it's not healthy, right? There's
no.
obviously more to it than that. We have to really make it more uh
But you're right. I mean,
realistic.
that's where the conversation starts. I mean, like I said, we were both teachers, and more importantly, we were Montessori teachers, and that's a whole other ball game of philosophy and life skills. And so we were kind of blessed, and that's the kind of schooling that I went through. So truly blessed with having that conversation. But I mean, we haven't got the TV shows. He's about to be 14 months old, but the books, and we read, books that have been around for decades to newer ones, from corduroys to the Baby Bunny book. And I mean, we laugh all the time with how silly some of them are, but the conversations that the bunny book, I can't, it's slipping my mind. We've read it so many times, but it goes through the story of like, what the baby bunny is going to grow up to be like, and everybody has a suggestion, and they're all like fantastic jobs. And then at the end, the baby bunny just wants to be a dad. I'm like, that wasn't written today. Like that,
Right.
that
Or
wouldn't happen.
how about wait till you get to the Giving Tree?
Oh,
That's
my
controversial.
wife's favorite book, but yeah, I
A
mean,
little controversial, right?
yeah,
Just like depending on the metaphor that you're using, it's like you give and you give and you give, and then you just die alone.
yeah. But the,
It's
the
it's
conversations are there. I mean,
right.
you realize right away, like you said, parent. But then, on top of that, if you're not a parent, you've read something like that, or you've seen something like that. And I mean, for us, it's like, don't. It's not a matter of like, don't ever read that book. That was terrible. That's
Yeah.
our opportunity to say, this is a great story. Here's the conversation that is probably a little bit more enlightening, or a little bit
Yeah.
more, open minded. Because it's going to happen. You can't cut that off. But
And
um,
that's really the work of it, right? Is to
yeah,
recognize that you may have grown up with these biases. You may have grown up in a way that you're not extremely proud to have. Well, maybe you are proud, but that you want to rewrite your story
yeah,
a little bit. You want to maybe even reparent yourself as far as how you were taught about money. But it's that awareness that
yeah,
differentiates those who will succeed and those who will just remain to live in the past and never feel like they can get ahead and escape their past. Yeah, I think, the first step in managing your money well, especially when you're in a relationship where now you have to face somebody else's story and there
yeah,
might be friction or maybe even overlap, but it's important to talk about how you grew up learning about money, thinking about money, what your expectations are of your own financial life and what you want to afford in this world. Very important. And not so that we can judge each other or feel shame, but so we can understand where
yeah.
we're coming from.
Because I think, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I mean, conversations like that for numerous topics, I'm sure, but like that seems to be the one where, you either see this divide in couples and you don't have that, or I mean, I've very rarely, but I mean, I can remember, the first few times I heard, of either friends or family, where somebody had a separate bank account completely for this, and you didn't have those conversations about like, well, this is my money. And there's parts of it like, you certainly understand, but it's like the true like cut. And like, I mean, that was the way I was raised. And so maybe that's why it's in my head, but it was like, hold on, wait a minute. So you're not having that conversation at all
Mm,
about money then, because
yeah.
this is what they make. And I have, and again, maybe it's the way I've raised, maybe it's the fact that, you've got a different, humble moment to have that thought. But every time I hear you say, or anybody, say when she makes more, any conversation about when, if a woman makes more, I'm like, where's the problem here? That's great. I mean, I don't think there's been I mean, we were, like I said, I mean, both teachers in two different scenarios as far as private and public. And my wife has always made more.
Mm.
And
And that's
I mean,
okay with
it
you. You've
is.
never,
And it's,
and is she okay with it?
yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, we've
Yeah.
never, because we really, and it's probably something with to do with the Montessori teaching, as far as like roles and things like that in your life. And you're not just a father, you're not just a husband, you're not just a wife. That's one aspect of you, and it takes, I think that's one of the things that we've seen the most is the mental aspect of having those conversations, is that you're kind of defined, like you said, by, either rich or poor, or, you have money, or, born into money or not. And, for us, it was never been, I don't know, it's almost like not on the table at all sometimes
Mhm.
that, you could certainly see where it could be that, here I am 2 days out of the week, home by myself working, but I have 3 days home with, our son, and that doesn't happen for a lot of people. And I could, she could look at it that I'm always at work and I'm always, and but you make the choice not to. But I don't think that a lot of people want to have that conversation. Maybe I don't know.
It scares us. It scares
Yeah,
people to go there, and talk about
yeah,
money because it, like we talked about earlier, it unleashes, it reveals so
a
much
lot.
about, like, how you were raised and maybe things you're not particularly, um, you know, desiring to share, things that you've been trying to bury or what have you. And yeah, I mean, the long story short, money is emotional, and couples. If I remember going on a talk show about money and marriage, and there was a wife and a husband in the audience, and she did not know how much her husband made. Couldn't tell you, even
Couldn't tell you.
ballpark, like what his salary was. And he said, "Well, it's not really her business." And I said, "Are you married?
Yeah,
Because it is her
it
business.
is kind of. Yeah,
It is, and so very interesting, and this was
yeah,
probably because of something he was taught, right,
yeah.
growing up. It's not something that he just decided one day. He saw that normalized in his life,
Somewhat, right?
and it was creating a lot of problems in their relationship.
Sure. I mean, because that, I mean, there's an automatic, a line of communication that isn't there, and that leads to, or possibly, maybe not like, expected or assumed, but
Well,
it could lead
it's
to
usually
other lines of communication
yeah,
that,
it's a sign of bigger problems.
yeah,
It right? It's like it's a trust issue, it's a transparency issue, it's a respect issue. One of the I'll recommend. I don't want to cannibalize my podcast here, but
no,
or yours. But Ramit Sethi is a friend, and he wrote "I Will Teach You to Be Rich," and he has a podcast with the same name where he talks to couples about their money. And if you really want to go deep diving on the psychology of money in relationships, that's a good
that's
one.
the way to go.
If you think you have problems in your marriage, financial problems, wait till you hear these
Wait
people.
till you hear that. But it's, it's just so funny and interesting. I mean, to listen to, as far as, what people's education and what, conversations they aren't willing to have. But then beyond that, what the expectation is for you to understand. So the part of the reason why it just kind of hit me that like this conversation needs to happen, with you, was from my wife and I's, like, chats. And I don't think they're so far fetched as far as what we experience and do, but you can see where they are. So just recently, hospitals, two big name hospitals, two big name universities behind them. They have two different ways of dealing, which I'm sure a lot of people do, dealing with um, healthcare, number one, and then also, like, long term investments, and and how they give that back. So the where she was just kind of your standard, conversation when it comes to here's what we'll contribute, and kind of done. Well, now we had a choice between the standard, what you normally, would hear when it comes to, you give this much, we'll give that much. But there was an option for, and I'll butcher it, so I'll just kind of leave it. It was kind of like, in a way, it was like a pension plan. Um, so we spent a 30-minute walk with our son, and he was probably just, staring off of the trees and watching our dog as we're walking. And we spent the whole 30 minutes going over the different options and thinking about it. But by the time we got to the end of the walk, it was like, how many people do they give this conversation to, or give these choices to? And they just go home and go, I have no idea, and don't have anybody to ask, but they didn't have the education to begin with to even consider what that means. And so
Yeah.
she's a nurse, and by no means do we consider ourselves old on most days, but that profession, and that was a change for her. And she knew right away that she's sitting in class with 20-year-olds, or kids that are just coming out of high school. And so predominantly that's that realm of, of young kids that are coming into this, and here's this big, tray of options when it comes to your future. And
it's
so where did that, where does that get, where did the education, I guess, of money get lost? Because I mean, I could tell you from teaching in middle school, we had that when I started. This has been like 10 years ago. And that was like, this fun conversation. I think the guy worked for First Union. I can't remember, maybe somewhere like that, but he was a friend of my mom's. And he would come in like 1 week out of the year, every year, and teach pieces of the class. Simple stuff like if you're going to go to college, here's what college tuition is. Here's if you want an apartment. But then slowly it was like not even by her choice or the school or the classroom choice, it was the school's choice that, hey, we're paying that guy to do what? No. But you
Mm,
saw that carrying forward. I don't remember even myself, honestly,
yeah.
in high school having that conversation or anything finance related.
No, I mean, look at me. I have a degree in finance. I took maybe 4 classes, right? 400 level classes that were not even that were so abstract, like things I'm not even using today in my day to day. Like, so yeah, we definitely don't prioritize money culturally, educationally, institutionally, all of the ways. But so that's where, I think people like me, who have a passion for it and are approaching it from from a service angle, um, are helpful, I hope, because
Yeah.
there is that gap, and people need that information, and smart people, this takes time to learn, and it's not
Super.
like I don't want to say that money is rocket science, but it does take time to sort of
Oh,
learn. And you took that 30-minute walk, and that, but you had the luxury of like having a partner who wanted to even have that
yeah.
conversation with you and making the time for it. This isn't something that everybody has the time for.
No.
Even in our house, my husband just texted me. He's like, my company, I'm on his health insurance plan. Our company's going to switch to a new healthcare company in January. So we need to do open enrollment again. I was like, open enrollment are like the two most hated words, I think,
Yeah.
in the financial dictionary, because it only means you're gonna be guessing your way through the whole thing. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna need this plan. I'm gonna try to strike a
That's
balance between, premium and benefit. And I don't know. I just
think
hope I don't get sick.
right. I think my teeth are straight now. I'm not planning on this having. Yeah. No. I mean, I'm with you on that one for sure. But I think, I mean, but I mean that happens every year for everybody, or should, right? As far
Yeah,
as like healthcare,
if you're
but that I
lucky.
mean,
If you're lucky,
there's
it's
a
a good problem to have, I guess. You have
yeah.
options.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, it feels like rocket science, but it's so there's simple conversations really, but it's like anything else, right? You don't want to talk about, eating healthier until all of a sudden, you've got some physical ailment, or, like you don't want to talk about maybe you need to get out and exercise or move more until you can't move. I
Right.
feel like for whatever reason, money fell into that bank as well,
Yeah,
no
we
pun
te
intended, right?
it becomes something we concern ourselves with in an emergency.
Yeah.
And we don't do enough proactive planning and thinking and crafting of our financial lives. It's a lot of it is just in reaction to things that get thrown on our plate. Okay, now I have to afford this, or now I have to figure this out. And that's while life is still happening and
Yeah.
you might not have the capacity, you weren't ready for it, and it just makes it more difficult.
Have you, as you're just talking about the education of it and making it easier, do you find that as somebody that enjoys comedy and I'm hoping, labels themselves as a comedian in there, um, is that like a far stretch to not joke necessarily about money, but like blend the two, or is it just
Yeah,
like
I mean,
is it
that's
one of
such
those
a good
topics that makes you
question.
go,
I've
yes, did she just joke about that?
Right. I definitely think there's some humor, in the way that people might think about money. But I just want to make sure that it's difficult. I think it's a challenge.
Yeah.
I think it's possible. And people have encouraged me to do that, kind of combine, because there's a lot of humor and I think humor is a great way to uh, develop emotional strength
Sure.
around a difficult topic. And then you can start talking about it in a way that feels more freeing and not so overwhelming and intimidating. And also, I think to point out that when you're talking about, let's say I was doing a stand up something or other about like the crazy things people say about money or think about money, you might hear yourself right in that.
Sure.
And it's all meant to be, it's all said because we want to make sure that everybody doesn't feel isolated, right?
Yeah.
That we're all, this is like our kind of screwed up culture around money. Yeah, if you really like analyze, if you could, there's humor in like giving
There's
a
humor.
19-year-old a $250,000 loan to study basket
Sure.
weaving at an unproven college, right? Like that's wrong, but also kind of
And
hilarious.
hilarious, right? And unfortunately, probably some bit of
And
truth, right, in that joke.
it's all at the expense of this poor 19-year-old who hasn't even voted yet, hasn't even probably gotten a license if they live in New York, because no one gets their license in New York until they're 45. So we're in giving them this like massive responsibility, financial responsibility without a parachute at all.
Right.
We're just throwing them out of the plane with a load of money.
Have fun, right? Choose your own
Here's
adventure and
some jokes.
welcome. You
I
can
don't know if
keep
they're
those.
funny
They
or
are
not.
free of charge.
Go on to something here. Go on to something here.
No, I mean it's something I've like always been curious. I mean, from the minute you talked about taking a comedy class, like just like any other topic, there's got to be a line. But I wonder, because you have such involved conversations, but then you have such just lighthearted conversations, and I could feel the tension already, with somebody that's like just so serious, talking about money and investment all day, and then cracking a joke and going, "What?" But then
Yeah.
at the same time, it's what you needed. It's because I don't feel like. I mean, I see it all the time. Like, when it comes to the health and wellness realm, everybody wants to give these top 10 lists that are, 5 things you should do, and those are great. But you start repeating it. I'm sure it's got to be the same thing with finances and getting people to educate. So yeah. So thank you for doing this. I don't want to take up like too much more of your time there. I know
No, thank you for having me. This has been a long time in the works, I know.
it's
I'm glad to see you have this podcast and you're
yeah.
getting you're growing your platform, you're getting more out there. I love your work.
Thank you. I've had a pleasure doing it, and I, just kind of as it's kind of come along here, and watching people that I admire, that do it from, various genres, but it just, make it seem like, okay, there's a conversation rather than, a force of hand to like, I've got to say this.
Right.
It's what you feel. So I want to give you the red carpet here at the end, just to share with people what you've got going on, where they can find you, any
Thanks.
and anything you want to share.
That's very nice of you. Well, I recently joined CNET as
Yeah.
editor at large of CNET Money. They're growing the brand. CNET's been around for 30 years, 30 plus years, and has become this real trusted source of news and analysis for technology. But in recent years, they've been growing to include advice and news around things like parenting and wellness, and more recently money. So I've joined their team to help build out that extension, and it's been really fun. They're licensing my podcast, which is called
Yeah.
So Money. Thanks for the shout out. It's called So
Absolutely.
Money. It's 3 days a week, interviews with interesting people about their money. And on Fridays, I answer people's money questions. So if you're listening and you're like, I'd like to maybe ask her a couple things about money or career or life or
Please
whatever.
do.
I'm also a mom to 2 kids. I love real estate. So I like to talk about a lot of things. I'm also like into pop culture. So don't ask me about like really recent pop culture, like more of a 90s trivia.
Extremely fun to follow. If no one's following you on Instagram that's listening to
I
this,
try to keep
extremely
it
fun to follow.
real.
Yeah.
There's no agenda on my social media, if you can tell. I
Which
am
is
not one of
good.
those
It
like,
really, I think once you check that out and realize that, you know what, like you don't have to post it this time with that hashtag
oh,
and this
I
and it.
wish that said, that people are doing it so well and are
There are.
very much having an agenda and get the likes and all the things. But JD, we're busy. I don't
Yeah.
know. Going on. And I don't want to like add more people to my
No,
team just to be, you know what I mean? So
just
you got to
invest.
pick and choose. But thank you so much for
No,
having me. This
thank you
has
so much.
been so much fun. But yeah, if you want to reach me, Farnoosh at somoneypodcast.com. You can also DM me on Instagram. I'm around. That's where I like to hang out on social media. You will not find me on TikTok.
It's probably a good thing,
I've
right?
drawn the line.
Yeah.
The line in the sand has been drawn.
Thank you. Thank you so much.